sacredness comes from the recognition of, there's room for all of this. All of this is fleeting. All of these experiences is fleeting, but I am not overwhelmed by them because I am infinite in my being. When you recognize that infinite nature of that ground of being, you see that all can come and go. There's room for all of it. And it's at that point you recognize the fleeting nature of it. And in the same way the rose only flowers for a moment in spring, we're not trying to keep hold of it. We actually are then able to taste it and experience it and appreciate it. And there's where we start to see the sacredness. Ah. Yeah.
Hello, Imogen. Great to have you on this podcast.
Lovely to be here, Ilona.
Wonderful. Oh, the podcast is called Awakening Now, and it's primarily for people that are looking for awakening, just awakened, and everything about that from different perspectives, different views, different cultures. But there is something in common, something is running through all of this, through every human being, this desire, a call for home, knowing yourself. So I wonder here now, what is your definition of awakening? What does that mean to you?
To me, awakening is the recognition of who and what we fundamentally are. And as you said, that in that recognition, there's a sense of home. There's this sense of this searching stops. And we discover that which we thought we were searching for. And often we're searching for that in an outward manner, in a doing manner. And actually what we discover is that which we sought is that which we always were. And so fundamentally, that's how I would describe awakening. Of course, that looks very different in terms of that journey for each and every one of us. And I would also say the embodiment of that can take on many different flavors depending on your circumstance, your makeup, your personality, the way in which consciousness is embodied, and how the lived reality of that looks can be quite different.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I completely agree with you on every word. Would you like to share a little bit about your journey, how that happened, what happened? Like, let's say this big shift, big recognition.
Yeah, so I started my journey unbeknownst to myself, really, from a very early age when I learned meditation when I was sort of 5, 6 years old, 4, 5, 6 years old, somewhere in there. My mother was a teacher, and so my meditation journey started very early and was really the background of my life, the paradigm in which I grew up. And I went to the school in the UK and eventually ended up in the university in America as well. And so this idea of we are fundamentally consciousness, pure consciousness, our divine nature, was something that was so ordinary to me that I didn't even realize or recognize that I was seeking per se. It was just part of my life. It was part of the direction of my life. And so I took it for granted. I think it wasn't something that I identified with, but it was something that was unfolding in throughout my whole life, really. And that took on a different flavor. I think it was in sort of 2000s, mid 2014, 15, 13, around there, in that I had a dear friend of mine that passed away unexpectedly, and that sort of it was quite a spiritual shock, I think. That's how I would call it now. It made me go, hang on a second, what's going on here? What is life about? Life is so fragile. Am I happy? I think was the question that really started to take hold in my heart is what am I doing all of this for? And so it was at that point that I would say things really shifted quite rapidly from that point for me. I found myself, I had a sort of what I would now say was a glimpse, a very real, true glimpse that lasted several days. It was preceding a retreat to go in silence with Adyashanti, actually.
Oh, wow.
And had a very clear recognition of there is no Imogen. There was that emptiness recognition. So that clear recognition of who and what I thought I was experientially. And I'd had lots of beautiful spiritual experiences prior to this, obviously being a meditator for so long and sort of steeped in all of that. It was very much filled with a lot of really beautiful experiences and a lot of insight there. But that glimpse was very much unexpected in terms of the lived reality of what was revealed in that moment. It didn't stick, but it was profoundly shifting for me. And then I went to live with Muji for about a year, which was quite a journey.
Wow. In Portugal?
In Portugal, yes. Yeah.
Oh.
I was on his team there. And yeah, that was again a really transformational time for me. But it didn't clear out everything. It didn't bring full clarity. And so actually what happened was I received a transmission, a spiritual transmission, which I was very skeptical of, but had seen the effects of that with my husband 6 months prior. And he had had a massive shift after he had received a transmission. And he was sort of at the end of his tether of like, I can't be doing this seeking for forevermore. And he was the archetypal seeker in our relationship, I would say, into everything. And he'd identified, okay, this is the route I'm going to take. I'm going to have a transmission. And I was, yeah, very skeptical, I would say, but genuinely saw the shift that he sort of encountered with that transmission. And so, yeah, I had my own transmission, and yeah, it was transformational for me too. So I would put that as that turning point, as that abiding shift. However, for me, I see it very much as sort of the final straw that broke the camel's back. I don't know if you know that phrase, but you can't say that that was the thing that did it. For me, it was every moment, every encounter with life, both good and bad, both seemingly spiritual and the most ordinary and mundane. Now looking back at it, I see all of that was sort of played its part in that final shift that did happen.
Wow. Beautiful.
It's been quite a journey since then, I would say, though. That was just the beginning in many ways. I thought it was the end point, but actually, not at all.
Yes, I agree. Sometimes it seems like life up till that point, up till that shift, it's like this big book with a lot of chapters, and then there is a shift, and that's a new book starts.
I couldn't agree more. It very much feels like that. And for me, the first part of that chapter it's a little bit like a caterpillar now learning how to be a butterfly, was initially what happened. Then there was what I would perceive as this time of sort of detoxing and integrating and unwinding all of this sort of conditioning and trauma. So that was how I would sort of describe the next phase. And that was quite a long phase for me personally, because there was a lot of stuff to upend and meet and continues to be in on some level as well, I would say. But yeah, it was definitely a journey into that next book of life.
And when did you start facilitating shifts for other people? Right away or later?
No, it was about 2 years later. And even looking back now, I mean, I've been doing this for about 6 years or so now. And even now, I'm like, gosh, so much has changed since then. And, I waited about 2 years. Well, I'd actually, first and foremost, I didn't ever plan on this work or this role. And I actually resisted it for quite a while as well. Had very ambivalent feelings about this, what feels like and felt like a calling, felt like life was sort of pulling this out into the world, pulling me out into the world in this way. But yeah, it was about 2 years. What happened was the teacher who I'd had this transmission with, I was sort of vaguely in touch with him once in a while, and then I heard through him that he had a group of people who'd had sort of similar shifts, and through that, there was the opportunity to learn how to give transmissions, and again, very ambivalent about that, very much like, I don't know if I want to do this role. Quite shy by nature, not sort of someone that is seeking to be sort of pushed into the public limelight, could actually at the time was, and some ways now are less so though, my worst nightmare, That's how I probably would have described it back then. But yeah, it felt right. It felt like again that calling or that sense of how I could be in service to life. And so that's when I started giving transmissions. And yeah, it's changed and shifted, and I've grown so much from this work and continue to do so, I think.
Wow. Well, and thank you.
Thank you.
Can you tell a little bit more about these mysterious transmissions? What is it?
Yeah.
How it works?
Yeah, so I call them divine light transmissions. Many people may know them in the sort of the more Vedic terminology of Shaktipat or even Darshan. But it's really, to me, a way in which we can tune into and attune to our divine nature. I call them divine light transmissions because it literally bringing light to our divine nature. That's how I perceive it. A little bit like I sing a C note, and you're able to use my voice to be able to find that C note within yourself. I'm not giving anyone anything. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions of all of this. And some people may view it that way, but to me, that is too dualistic in its viewpoint to suggest that you are not already that divine light, that divine nature. You can be occluded of that. It cannot be clear to you. You cannot see that. Absolutely, this can be true. But fundamentally, it is who and what you are. And so the transmissions are just a way, a modality of revealing that within people. It happens in many ways, through voice, through writings, through meditation. All of these ways. There's no singular way, I feel, in which we can become into remembrance of our nature. But the transmissions work on a more energetic level. So they work more on the silent, sort of pregnant energy level of life. It's much harder for the mind to grasp conceptually, which can be very helpful to have the mind sort of join in on this journey, but it also can be a tricky thing. So I use both modalities of sort of more satsang, more inquiry. I'm very much a fan of inquiry that leads very directly into the more somatic levels, the more felt experiences, and then even beneath that, the energetics. To me, that's sort of a top-down, I would say, approach. And then the transmissions are more sort of a bottom-up approach, where they work from the most fundamental, from that pure consciousness, from that divine level, sort of coming into manifest. That's broadly how I would distinguish the two. But ultimately, it points back to the same. So people sit in silence with me, and they don't have to do anything other than sort of find that openness and that receptivity, that yes. And it's not even to me, it's not even to the transmission, it's to themselves, it's to their nature, to that coming homeness. And then on an energetic level, there's a tuning in, whether they're conscious of it or not, there's a tuning in of their nature that happens in these transmissions. And there's a bunch of byproducts that can happen because of that. As with any of this work, we encounter different aspects that can and do happen. Various spiritual experiences, various unwinding of energetic sort of densities and conditioning, and all of these kind of things can and do happen. But to me, they're a byproduct. The main focus is very much on that revelation of that aha, this is who and what I am.
Beautiful. And I think that transmission is already here. It's always on, not like it's something switches off and on. Like you sit and oh, okay, now it starts. 30-second time.
No. There's a turning up of the volume of that I find that when we, that transmission, and I couldn't agree more, it's always happening. And actually, I would say it's always happening in all of us. And everything. There is a transmission, an energy footprint of life that is occurring, that is transmitting, that is shining in each and every one of us, in each and every experience of life. But yeah, I consider the sort of informal of transmissions and formal transmissions. And the formal transmissions is we attend to that level. There is that intention, there is that prayer, there is that turning towards that happens. And in that there's a sort of a turning up the volume that happens in that. And so when the transmissions formally start, we settle into the recognition of that, and that becomes more lively, that becomes more available as the volume of that is turned up, I would say.
Giving it a little break here for that silence.
Yeah.
To come in, little volume up, just gently.
Yeah. Allow ourselves to sink fully into that.
So, do you mind? We can spend a few minutes sinking in even deeper, just letting it through, and then we'll continue. And whoever is listening, it's for you. Just tune in. Sit quietly if you have time or space. Otherwise, you can come back to this recording and experience this. I could sit like this all day, but here we have this podcast going.
Yeah.
I closed my eyes for a little bit. There was a lot of light. Like, that light is always there. But there was a lot
Yes.
of light. And when I opened my eyes, it was interesting for a few seconds. The colors were different.
Yeah. I've been on such a journey with the transmissions themselves. It's opened up things in me through giving these transmissions that I didn't ever have any idea that that's what was available in life. And it's like when we start to open up, we start to have those conditioned limits, let's say, start to soften and dissolve. The potentiality of consciousness as it is embodied in this human form, to me, starts to really blossom. And it can be quite a journey. Well, it certainly has for me. Um, and my personal journey has very much been entwined with the journey of the transmissions for me. What they are today is very different from what they were when I was taught how to give them sort of 6 years ago. I don't know exactly how long it's been, about 6 years.
The living energy.
Yeah, and it's brought things like this relationship, and I wasn't brought up Christian at all, but it's brought this relationship with Mother Mary to light for me. She started showing up within the transmissions, and it took a while to recognize, because I didn't have that relationship with her beforehand. It took quite a while for me to recognize that that's what was happening. Yeah, little things like that. Well, that's not a little thing, but things like that, let's say, started to unfold in my life as I gave myself more to this, as I let sort of myself become what I would perceive as a vessel for this work in this way. And it's really brought me to a place of really truly loving how life expresses itself in each individual. Really learning to see just how sacred life shows up, the ways, the lessons, the unfolding path that each of us find ourselves on is entirely unique, I think. And sort of learning to really sink into our own journey, our own unfoldment. A lot of this has taught me that. And I think that's something that I really try to encourage in others, that recognition of not compare another's path, but actually to learn to trust your own unfoldment and your own voice and your own expression, what life wants to bring into expression through you, let's say.
That's the most powerful message there can be. And from my view, when I'm doing these podcasts and meeting all these wonderful people with different views, the message is always the same. Trust your own, experience. It's like zillions of different experiences, but it's not yours.
Yeah.
So trusting, knowing that this is valid and this is perfect for you. This is the most powerful message.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much for bringing this in the ether, out in the open. Great.
You're welcome.
Tell me a little bit more about your work with people, like how they find you, how they can find you, what you offer, how you work.
So they can find me on my website, which is beyondimogen.com. And from there, the usuals, you can find social media and all the rest of it. It's all beyond Imogen is how, and that started from a blog and has sort of grown to what it is now. And I'm sure will change as time goes as well. The work I offer is primarily one-on-one and group work. So the groups are more based on divine light transmissions, more heavily focused, let's say. I do retreats, I do intensives, I have a regular group meeting twice a week and satsang. And then one-on-one work, it's very hard to define one-on-one work because the way I see it is I meet people where they're at. I meet people and provide a place where we can explore whatever needs exploring for them. I do this broadly in the guise of satsang. That's the I don't know the right word, the envelope it all sits underneath there is satsang. But as we've been talking about here, there's an energetic component, there's a transmission running throughout all of that work that draws naturally us to those deeper grounds. And so wherever someone's at, to me, it is to meet themselves deeper and deeper and deeper into that recognition. And that can take very many different forms as to what that work actually looks like on the ground. But yeah, that's primarily how I would see myself, as meeting people, to hold space for them, to find where they're not able to meet themselves and to tenderly sort of guide them into a deeper and deeper acceptance and love and surrender as well of into who and what they are. And then at the end, we do a transmission as well. So it's these two threads. I think they support each other very beautifully. This sort of more, I call it the more humanity, the more work on the human level. And then there is the sort of attending to that recognition of our divine nature, the ground of being. And so to me, they work in union. There can't be one without the other. That's not, I feel, complete unless there is an inclusion of all. And so that is an attending to our humanity and the ways in which we're sort of rejecting or struggling or conditioned to think there's certain aspects that shouldn't be, and so therefore suffering that. But also to recognize the transcendental being that we are too. So this is, I think, very important to have both of these elements, and eventually we recognize they're not two separate things at all.
Good. Well, I encourage everyone who's listening and feel this beautiful softness and divinity flowing out from Imogen right now to reach out to her and set up some session.
Yeah, the work for me, like I said, takes many different forms, and you can be anywhere on your path, I find. And I don't feel like I'm a teacher as such, more someone that is sort of walking the path alongside you as support for the time that is needed. And I think this is what all teachers are, whether they are teaching in the more traditional manner or not. They offer that ability to walk a while together so that we can all come to a deeper place with ourselves, let's say, pointing us home.
I agree. That word teacher is really not the right word, and there is no right word. So here I am. Just
yeah, I my sort of way I interact with language, I try to hold it all very lightly. We have to use these words in order to communicate,
right.
But ultimately they're pointing to something beyond all words. And so we can use whatever words we want,
I
all
agree.
holding it all very lightly.
Yeah, language is useful and practical, and that's the only one we have. And yes, we
Yeah,
can say word I or self or me or person anytime.
yeah, yeah. Once you know what you're pointing to and from,
Mm-hmm.
words become much more playful, I think. Until that point, they're very serious. You can, you know, there's a sort of a necessity to, well, what do I mean by this? And so we tend to take words a little bit more seriously when we're not living from what they are pointing to.
Right. And I think another thing is like we do need to know these definitions before we can get loose from them or set them loose. Because often
Yeah.
people are talking some spiritual talk, not even knowing what means in their own experience. So it's kind of
Oh,
necessary
yes.
to redefine the language and words for yourself. And then you can see that concepts are concepts, experience is experience. It's a different, yeah, no words here. I stop.
Yes, I very much agree.
But you come to
It's
that
very
point where,
useful.
words are no longer necessary. You still feel everything, see and hear, and don't even need to think of all these labelings and all these meanings. And such a hassle in a way. Mm.
Yes, it's useful until it becomes a burden, until it becomes a constraint. Um, and then again, they're liberated. So we use words, they're useful, and then they become a constraint because we're sinking beneath the words, beneath the concepts into the direct experience. And then they're liberated so we can use the words again. That's been my perception of it, at least.
Yeah. And it's kind of a journey out from the head into the body, into the rest of it. Because
Yeah.
there is this thing called imagination and all this world of ideas, and the whole world is ideas. And then there is a
Yes.
journey from that into the heart, into the body, into the rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is definitely my view too. You can have an awakening and it can be very much still centered in the head. So you can have a clear insight, a clear recognition of your nature, but it hasn't yet sunken into the heart, into the body. And that's to me is like you're talking about the next book or the next chapter, whatever you want to call that. It's like that embodiment to me is what is being spoken of there is like consciousness embodied. It's like the light starts to penetrate into all of experience. So you can have that very clear understanding, that very clear insight, that very clear light of recognition. But there's that further journey. And it's not a linear thing, it's not necessarily one or the other, but broad strokes, painting very broad strokes here. I perceive that that's also how it goes, and it's a very energetic journey. I feel, and it takes with it everything.
Right. Yeah,
Nothing left
it's
out.
not enough to just recognize some concepts or
Yeah.
recognize. I mean, there is so much more going on than the head. But for somebody
Yes.
stuck in their ideas and how it should be, or the spiritual environment, let's call it that, it can be quite dry. It can be
It
like, yeah,
can.
okay, I'm not, it's just no feeling, no juice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's blank, it's empty. It's,
Yes, this is it.
yeah.
I see that as the first stages of awakening often.
Mm.
Again, it's not that it looks that way for everyone, but broad strokes, that sort of awakening in the mind is a very much awakening to the transcendent quality of experiences, that emptiness, that no self.
Mm-hmm.
And And as the awakening matures, there's a maturity of that. And there's the descent, and there's where the unity starts to take hold, the recognition of from this emptiness comes fullness, from this transcendent, from this divine nature, this emptiness. That can feel quite initially a negation of life. I am not this, I am not that. Descends into the heart where it takes hold, and there's the recognition of I am all of this. And there's the fullness that starts to take hold, and the love that starts to be there, the love of life, the love of self in all its forms. And it becomes that life becomes quite beautiful, and this real beauty of this dance, this play, this sense of love for all that life is starts to take hold as that descent starts to happen.
Yeah. And what would you say? There's this idea that if you want to awaken, if you want to be free, you should isolate yourself from negative people. Or don't let negativity close to you, or something like that along these lines, because normally it's like this enlightenment awakening looks like bliss forever. I want that. So I'm not going to feel negative. I'm not going to meet negative people or somebody difficult, because if you are still meeting difficult people, that means you're not awakened. That kind of misconception. But what's your view on that? I'd like to know.
I think it is a huge misconception, but I think it's a stage. I think it's a stage where we're still identified as the person, that recognition of feeling that we are a separate self, let's say. And in that, it, of course, everything, our environment, we feel separate from that. And so therefore it also can affect us very deeply. I think when you come into a deeper recognition, you recognize that this is all consciousness. And at that point, there is nothing that is rejected as part of life, but that all of these seeming experiences, whether they be good or bad, are what we encounter and what we meet along our path in order for growth, in order for wisdom, in order for learning and expansion. And so I would say at those kind of points, it's no longer seen in such black and white terms of negative and positive. It's no longer seen as something I need to avoid, something I need to, be careful of, and all of these ideas. Life becomes this ever growing and deepening sort of experience of the self. And so in that, there's nothing to avoid, but there are life lessons, there are wisdom learnings. And I think so why I say it's a stage is I think there can be a time where we have to be tuned into what those yeses and those boundaries, those senses of what's right and wrong for us. But it's not about the other. It's not about them being negative, them being bad, them being something that, we've got to avoid situations or people, but actually that there's something for us to sink into in our experience that is calling for our attention, that is being evoked by those situations. So yeah, we can look at it in a very dualistic term of, good and bad, or you can recognize that there's something in there for me to meet. And in that way, I don't think there's anything to be avoided. In fact, I don't think we can avoid anything. We might temporarily sort of hold it at bay somewhat, poorly, let's say. But eventually life reveals where we need to attend to again and again and again. If we don't get that message the first time, it will come back. It will rear its head and go, here, this is where I want you to look. This is where I want you to attend to. And so in that way, I don't see anything as negative or positive in those terms, but just that there's different flavors of learning. There's different flavors of experience. And all must eventually come home.
Wait, thank you. Another interesting question that I encounter people have, sometimes they say, oh, I feel this other person's negativity, their anger. They come in the room and they infect me with this anger, or I take it over. How to deal with that. So would you like to give a little bit of advice on this one?
For me, if there is someone in our vicinity that has an energetic footprint, immediately our attention goes to them. They are angry. They are the problem. They. To me, energy, if we're talking just on that fundamental level, we're not judging it, energy is either positive or negative, good or bad. We just see the differentiation of that. And to me, it is our response to that that causes the sense of right or wrong, good or bad. If there is someone in our vicinity that has this energy that we are reacting to, we are having a response to, for me, it's not to judge that as oh, I'm bad for having that response, but it is a call into meeting what is there, a call to, okay, this is bringing something up for me here. Now they are doing them. They've got whatever they have got going on there. There's something that is being evoked and triggered within me that is judging that anger, that is not liking that anger, that is having a physical response to that anger. I think there's wisdom in that then. There's wisdom there for us to attend to feel into, not just the conceptual stories and narratives of that, although I don't exclude any of that stuff either. But to me, I think of that like a pin on the map. Like, so all the stories, all the concepts, all the ideas, all the labels is pointing to the deeper levels and layers of that experience. Most people are only used to looking at that level. They stay in that level. And we can use that narrative, that conclusions, those conceptual overlays and viewpoints, and use them to feel into the deeper realms of that, traversing through the emotions, traversing into the feelings and then the sensations, and even beneath that, where there's no longer any labels and it's just the energetic vibration of it. When we start to be able to meet all those different layers, this is where we start to discover the wisdom of that person coming into our life, into the room with that energy, is actually pointing us back to something in ourselves. And it's pointing us back to ourselves. Fundamentally, at the bottom of it all bottoms out in the deepest ground. And that deepest ground is of being. That includes all of these layers, all of these experiences. So I think it's an invitation when we're having a response to someone. For me, it's always an invitation. And it's an invitation to know myself, to come into being with myself further.
Beautifully said. I also say that it's not their energy that you're feeling your own. It's like how many energies are here? So
yeah,
it's just a movement. You can't say this is that energy and this is that energy. It's all one energy. And how many energies are you perceiving right now?
Very true.
Is it one energy of Imogen, one energy of Ilona? Is it your energy?
Yeah.
Just
it's
this?
all the waves arising in the ocean. These waves are energetic sort of movements of life. And there's differentiation, yes, but fundamentally they're not separate. They're not anything other than consciousness revealing itself, consciousness in motion, consciousness coming into form from its formless nature, coming into form. And there's room for it all. There's no need to conceptually chop it all up into this idea of this is good, this is bad, this can be here, this shouldn't be here. It's when we do that that we find we start to suffer life. We start to say, no, this, and there's the birth of separation to me, the birth of this, not that. And where we have that, we suffer.
Mm-hmm. Oh, let's talk about sacredness.
Mm. It's a favorite topic of mine, yes.
Yes. Yeah, I think when there is a recognition at some point that I am awareness, or there is awareness, or there is consciousness, or there is this beingness, it can be quite dry
Mm-hmm.
unless you find that the heart is like a temple where the light lives, and that light, you can call it God, you can call it love, you can call it peace, but there is something there sacred where you go with a deep respect and honoring it just for the sake of being with it, in it, as it. So that sacredness, it can be quite elusive and not recognized until maybe somebody points it out. So can you point it out for us?
Yeah, I think again, it's a place we, sink into eventually. There's that initial awakening, and yes, it can be very dry. And I think it's dry typically because all we're noticing is all that we are not, and we're left with, this emptiness feeling. And again, this sacredness starts to come into play. It's a little bit like the analogy I would use is you sort of sit in a darkened room and it's pitch black, and you're like, there's nothing in here. And before, your room was filled to the brim, and the light was on, filled to the brim, and it felt claustrophobic and I don't want to be here. And then in this silence, the room empties out, but it's pitch black in many ways. And so but it feels very peaceful because it's not this filled with content. Suddenly the room is empty. And so a lot of people would characterize those stages as sort of this sense of peace, this sense of emptiness, this sense of calmness. But the way I would describe it is you sit in that room long enough, and what you start to feel is the fullness again. All the objects start to come into light. From the inner light, it starts to sort of shine into the darkness of the room. You go, oh, there's a chest of drawers, there's a bed, suddenly all the content starts to become aware. You've become aware of it. And as sort of, instead of it overcoming you, which is what was happening prior to all of this, it felt overwhelming, very claustrophobic because you're bound in the mind body. Here now, this is a room where there are no walls, no floors, no ceilings. And so all of these objects come and go within that room, and yet this room is infinite. And so I think it's the difference between believing ourselves or misunderstanding ourselves to be this mind body, which is a finite resource, only has so much room. So there's thoughts, there's feelings, there's sensations, there's experiences. It feels very overwhelming. And then you come to that first initial recognition of that emptiness, and suddenly, nice, okay, I'm not that. I'm not that. I'm not that. I'm not that. But this sacredness comes from the recognition of, there's room for all of this. All of this is fleeting. All of these experiences is fleeting, but I am not overwhelmed by them because I am infinite in my being. When you recognize that infinite nature of that ground of being, you see that all can come and go. There's room for all of it. And it's at that point you recognize the fleeting nature of it. And in the same way the rose only flowers for a moment in spring, we're not trying to keep hold of it. We actually are then able to taste it and experience it and appreciate it. And there's where we start to see the sacredness. Ah, this is fleeting, but this was born into existence in this moment to be tasted. So whether that is sadness or grief or anger or happiness or emotions or thoughts even, personality, likes and dislikes, all of that then becomes sacred because all of it becomes this sort of divine unfolding of life in this moment that we can't hold on to any of it. But here we are experiencing all of it. It's only when we know ourselves to be the infinite, unending experience of life that we can then start to appreciate and actually start to feel how sacred it is to have this moment with all of that this moment is and all that this experience is, how it cannot be another way and how it won't be there the next moment. And so this is where the heart starts to feel the love of life, starts to feel the sacredness of this expression. It's not a mistake, it's born into existence. And for that, we start to fall in love then with all of expressions.
Yeah,
Born of consciousness.
well, if there is a goal in the spiritual awakening, I think that would be it. To love
Yeah,
life, to love the whole, to love each experience, each human, each situation.
everything,
Mm.
everything. And it's taken a while for me to get to that place. And I'm sure there'll be further unfoldments of that. But I was definitely very much firmly in the camp of the peace, the emptiness, the quietness, the dryness, actually. Initially for a few years, while there was also this turmoil going on of unwinding all this conditioning and these traumas and these sort of ways of thinking that were very much embedded in me as the person. So it's taken a while, and it's been quite a surprise in many ways. I heard of it, I read about it, and you hear of saints and sages of the times talking in this manner. But it certainly wasn't my first initial experiences of awakening. It has come about as I've sort of, like I said, we were talking about before, that sort of descent has happened. There's where it's starting to take hold more and more, and all these in the ability to meet everything in that view of its sacred expression. What I'm noticing is there is a noticing of the more and more seemingly mysterious or different layers and levels of experience that weren't available to be seen before. As we start to sort of almost expand out into the vastness that we are, it's like there's all these layers, there's rooms for more and more of varying experiences of life to be there. So far from being overwhelmed, it's like the more that shows up, the vaster I become, let's say, I as consciousness in this form.
So for me, what it sounds is like there is no rush. There is no rush, no like hurry up. I need to deconstruct everything, or I need to realize something quick, or where's that next thing that will give me something? It's just sitting back and starting to notice that this is already complete. What if I use word sacred, even though it doesn't really sound like me? Let's see what happens. What if this is sacred? Oh my God, it is. Wow.
Yeah. I would say to those that are even querying whether they should do that, you invited people to do that there, which was so beautiful. But even if that just they feel the possibility of, oh, I could do that. To me, it's revealing a ripeness to hear that and a ripeness of that possibility. I see all of this as a symptom, not a cause. You know, a lot of people go, oh, if I meditate, I do this. If I do this work, this will happen. You know, it's very goal orientated. And for me, I think the whole thing starts to be seen in a different light at a certain point, where we see that it is all unfolding perfectly, that the ripening of the ability to hear this, the ability to see this, the ability to live this is entirely not our doing, but is God's doing, is life's doing, is consciousness is doing, whatever word you want to use there is totally fine. And it's to recognize that actually this process of unfoldment that I find myself in, this quote spiritual journey, well, really all of life is a spiritual journey. It's this recognition of this journey I find myself on is not about the end point, but actually about the ever unfolding, ever deepening, ever widening experience of life, of consciousness embodied as this human life at this moment. And in that, we start to see, I wasn't doing any of this. I wasn't making any of this happen. All of this was just an unfolding. All of this was just a happening. All of this was how life was unfolding and unpacking and deepening for me in its own perfect timing. And we start to really sink into the trust of it all. We start to really sink into, actually, I don't need to be anywhere other than where I am. This is what life is giving me at this moment. This is the cutting edge best of where I can meet, where I am, where I can grow, where I have insight of. This is it. And it's complete in that. And that's not to say tomorrow might be entirely different. And I might, the journey that I find myself on 5 years from now may be very vastly different from this moment. But it is to say that this moment is everything that I need and everything that I am. It's perfect.
Including this message, these signposts, like
All
previews, the chapters.
All of it. And all the difficulties, all of the, you know, I think it's very easy to sort of see that all of the signposts, all of the nice stuff, all of the beautiful experiences, all of the lovely stuff, all of this we can include, right? We can all sort of go, oh, yeah, I can get on board with that. I can accept that. But where I find it most interesting is actually to look at all the things we've excluded from that recognition. All the ways we're going, yeah, but not this. This is something special. This is something else. This is something that is not part of my journey. This is something I need to work on or get rid of. And on one level, sure, there's work to be done. But on another level, a recognition of actually those things which I've deemed as shouldn't be there are serving a very important purpose. They are there because actually there's where we're being guided to meet some aspect of life that we've subtly rejected. We've subtly said, no, not this. And I pay attention to that stuff far more than the quotes good stuff. I pay attention far more to all the areas in which there's difficulty with life. There's a sense of not this. Because to me, this is where, when we sink into all of that, there's where we discover, no, this too. This is perfect too. This has just as much value as any other part of experience for me.
I completely agree with that. And I think that path to this lightness or the sacredness goes through all and each invitations of meeting the most difficult, most unwanted, most denied and repressed, or whatever energies that arise. That's the way in.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah. It's those areas that actually provide the most fruit. The most sacred fruit is in those areas that we have determined are what that shouldn't be there. That's where we find our most sacred fruit, I find.
So beautiful to be with you, Imogen.
Really, really lovely to sit with you too.
And I thank you so much for sharing yourself with me and with everyone listening. And I want to ask you, do you have any final words or final advice or anything like just freshly coming in for you that needs to be said or heard?
The one thing I feel we haven't sort of touched on that feels very important to me is for people to approach themselves and this life with a sense of openness, a sense of curiosity, a sense of tenderness and love. To in that vein, what you notice is actually we become much more intimate with life when we come at it with an open heart, with a tenderness, a curiosity. And I don't mean just to the good stuff. I mean to all of it, to allow ourselves to become more intimate with every part of life. And to do that, often we have to have that curiosity. We have to have that sense of, I don't know. And so to reach life in that way, to reach yourself in that way with that tenderness, I think has been one of my saving graces, let's say, in life, to find that curiosity, to find that tenderness.
Oh, that's deep. Thank you. Yeah. Softening, softening, softening.
Yes. Yes. Deepening, 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 widening, widening, widening.
Feathers falling down.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who joined in and listened and received the message.
Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you and bye for now. See you next time.